So today, we'll be covering these 4 areas about saying no. First, we'll talk about why saying no is so hard, what will happen if you say yes all the time, what good can come out of saying no, and lastly, we'll talk about how to start saying no. I know saying no is something that's challenging for many people, and that's why today we're going to talk about it. Okay, so to start off, I want to share 2 different research studies with you. In the first study, participants were asked to get 3 random strangers to borrow their phones because they needed to make a call because their phone was dead. So maybe just a question to all of you. How many people do you think the participants had to approach before someone lent them their phone? You can just type in the chat. Okay, so 6, 5, 1, 6, 1, 1.5. Okay, so yeah, actually, for the participants, they predicted that they would need to ask an average of 10.1 people, but actually, they only needed to ask 6.2 people. So, in other words, like 1 out of 2 people they approached agreed to lend them their phones. So, in the second study, participants asked strangers to vandalize a library book and writing the word pickle in pen on one of the pages. What percentage of strangers do you think complied? Again, you can write in the chat. None. 60%? 10, 20? Depends on what country this study was in. I think that's a very good point. Yeah. Maybe in some countries, people might comply more. In Australia, one. Okay. So actually, I think this study, if I'm not wrong, it was done in the US. And for so in New Zealand, 100% of people will comply. Seems like people in New Zealand are very compliant to other people. Okay, so in the study, actually, a lot of the participants voiced their discomfort. You know, they didn't want to get into trouble, and they said, okay, it's vandalism, and they were reluctant to participate. However, actually, more than 64% agreed to vandalize the book. So quite more than half of the people agreed to it. And what does this mean? So from these 2 studies, I think we can see that it's actually difficult for people to say no. And many people struggle to say no, even in situations where they feel uncomfortable in, or even when the situations or the things that they were asked to do are against their values. And oftentimes, we tend to overestimate the likelihood of people saying no to our requests. So here are some things that powerful leaders think about saying no. So let me assure you, saying no can be beneficial. And like these 3 powerful leaders, they agree. Steve Jobs reminds us that saying yes to something is saying no to many other great ideas out there. And according to both Warren Buffett and Tony Blair, saying no is an important part to leadership and success. So before we continue, I'd like to hear a little bit more from all of you. What would you like to say no to? If you're comfortable, you can type it in the chat. Otherwise, maybe keep it in mind about this thing that you want to learn to say no to throughout the presentation. Okay, extra work. I think that's something that a lot of times we tend to say yes to our bosses. It's so easy. Doing jobs that are other people's responsibility, being asked to take on extra work tasks, work you don't enjoy. Yeah, I think that's important as well. Yeah, so a lot of times when it comes to work, it's quite difficult to say no to our bosses or to our colleagues. Like, and also, uh, we need to know when we are ready at that capacity. Okay. So yeah, I'm just reading the chat. So being able to say no to things that are not your own responsibility, or thinking you're not capable of something that you haven't even tried yet. So giving yourself a chance. That okay. So yeah, all these are good things to learn how to say no to, or learn what to say yes to. So first off, I'd like to share a bit more about like why saying no is so difficult. I think for many of us, we learn at a very young age that using the word no can result in some unpleasant responses from people that we want to please. Also, many of us are afraid of conflict. We don't like others to be angry at us or critical of us. So we avoid saying no because we're afraid that it'll put us into conflict with someone else, be it, our boss, our supervisor, our partners, our families, our friends. And also, as children, like many are taught not to go against authority. So our bosses, right? That's someone that we see as authority. Um, since young, we are always supposed to do what our parents say, our teachers say, just because they have power. And we obey because we are afraid of being punished, and also because we have the desire to please and to be loved by all these people who are very important to us. Unfortunately, many of us, we carry this into adulthood. And another reason why it's difficult to say no is because we want to fit in. We want to be liked by our peers. So the need to belong is something that's very strong in many people, and we want to be accepted. And a lot of times people find that if someone is just yes to everything, they find it easier to get along with that person. um, and also another thing is that we don't want to let other people down. We think that if we say no, I cannot do it right now, we're letting others down. And we might also think that we might not seem as a team player, or we might lose out opportunities. Maybe if our boss asks us, like, hey, can you do this extra task? We're afraid to turn them down because we don't want them to think that we are not being helpful or we are not part of the team. Okay. And so then what happens if we say yes all the time? Okay. So initially it might seem like um, making relationships better is if we say yes. We say yes to our friends, our bosses, our colleagues. I mean, who doesn't like someone who is always, so pleasing and helpful in all the situations? But in the long run, I think like some of you have experienced it as well. I'm sure I have experienced it as well. Like whether we want to admit it or not, you're gonna start feeling manipulated, or you start feeling like you're giving and giving and giving all the time. And that gets exhausting. So sometimes, people might then resort to maybe some passive aggressive behavior, whether we're aware or not, in order to like win back some of the energy that we are letting. So we might then get annoyed at our partners or our colleagues, our friends. And it might feel fair at first, but in the long run, it can damage relationships as well. So for me, sometimes I also say yes too much at work. Or like I'll say, yeah, I can handle it all. I'm fine because initially my schedule looks so open. So I'll take up all the different work responsibilities. I'll say yes to hanging out with all my friends. And then as my calendar gets really packed, that's when I feel very stressed and then I might get annoyed. And like I might get annoyed at like little things that people do and I might get snappy. So that's when I'm like, oh, okay, I'm not being the nicest person I can be. And that's when I start realizing, okay, I need to say no to certain things. So also, if we say yes all the time, sometimes you might feel anxious because you look at um, all the things that you have on your plate and it's so overwhelming. The more you spend time doing things for others, the less time you have for yourself. And sometimes always giving in to the demands of others can make you feel bad about yourself. And it can also lead to low self esteem. So if we don't focus on what we really want and spend all our time doing what others want, it's also possible to eventually not know what we really want. So knowing all of that, like, let's talk a bit more about the benefits of saying no. So saying no allows you to be honest about your feelings. So many people feel like they are forced into participating in events or projects just because they can't say no. You know, um, but saying no means that you place importance on your feelings and needs, and that can be empowering. Saying no can also build your confidence, and it gives you that chance to take control of your time and ultimately take more control of your life. And sometimes saying no, you think that you might miss out, but that's not always true. So saying no to things that you're not passionate about, I think someone earlier on said like saying no to things that you don't enjoy, right? That's something that's important because if we say no to things that we don't want or that we're not passionate about, it leaves us more room to say yes to things that we really want to take part in or to do. So if you remember earlier, the quote from Steve Jobs, people think focusing means saying yes to the thing you've got to focus on, but that's not what it means at all. It means saying no to the 100 other good ideas that there are. So next time you find yourself wanting to say yes because you don't want to miss out, remind yourself that saying no now means saying yes to something else in the future. And also, like, if you say yes to side projects or helping out, you're missing out on your own priorities. But saying no frees out time for you to focus on your priorities. And also, it keeps you on task and allows you to do whatever that's important to you. And another way of looking at it is if you say no, you allow other people a chance to say yes. So now that we talked about like the pros and cons of saying no, like the benefits of saying no and the cons of saying yes all the time, we can talk about how then to start saying no. I know it's something that might not be the easiest, but there are ways that we can, small steps that we can take to eventually be able to say no and stand up for ourselves more. So earlier I talked a little bit about priorities. um, it's important to ask yourself what's important in your life, be it like your day-to-day life or your work in general. So before you determine whether you're going to say yes or no to a request, if you can take some time to sit down and think about what's important to you, what do you want. You can also take some time before you say yes or no to any request. You can always let the person who asks you know that, okay, I'll get back to you. And at work, like, think about whether priorities can be shuffled or whether a colleague could step in to assist you on other projects if you said yes to this one. Like, because if you say yes to something, then you're saying no to other projects. So you need to know whether it fits your capacity or whether there's other people who can help you out. And also, if work life balance is important to you, like, keep that in mind. If you say yes to a project, would that then compromise your work life balance? And you can always discuss. If you're not sure of your priorities at work, discuss it with your boss. You can let them know about what projects there are and ask them, like, let them know, hey, so and so gave me this project. Would this be part of my work task? And if I take this project, it might compromise other projects. Is that something that I should do? Yeah, something like that. And also, be clear and respectful when you respond. So if you realize that you neither have the desire nor the bandwidth to help, and therefore you need to turn down the request, be honest and upfront about your reasons. So keep your response simple, direct, and decisive, but make sure you respond. So don't give a passive no. So what a passive no is when someone simply just doesn't respond to you when you reach out to them for a request. Doesn't matter whether it's by email, by text, or by phone call, as long as you respond. So for example, like for myself, I had an experience where I was supposed to go on a holiday with a friend, and like about 2 weeks in, I was asking my friend, hey, I'm gonna book the air tickets. Like, are you still coming? Is this okay? No response. Few days later, I messaged my friend again, no response. And to me, I think that I would have rather my friend told me, hey, I can't go with you. I'm sorry. And I would have been totally fine with that. But with my friend not responding at all, I thought that that was not very respectful and not very nice. So I think that it's important for us to not be that person who provides that passive no. Sometimes, even though it might not be easy, um, it's better to say no than say nothing at all. And another times when we want to say no, because it's difficult, we might go like, oh, I don't know if I can. I'm not sure if I'll do it well. This leaves some room for persuasion. So to limit any frustration for yourself, be honest about why you're saying no. So if you're feeling challenged at work or if there's too much on your plate, just describe your workload and let them know, okay, hey, I'm already in charge of all these projects and I would be unable to do a good job if I took on another project and my work would be compromised. So I don't want that. And also, if you have the capacity, you can offer help in other ways. Like, because you want to still maintain a good relationship with the person that you are saying no to. It's critical to acknowledge the other side. So yeah, the person might not be happy or might not like that you're saying no. But also understand that, you know, the person's probably asking you because they really need help. So be empathetic, be compassionate, and you can help by offering a lifeline by asking, are there any small ways that you can be helpful to the project? Maybe you can attend brainstorming sessions or help read the first drafts or simply just be a sounding board for your colleague. So this is one way that you can say no while still conveying team spirit. And also manage your expectations. So even if you follow all of the steps that I talked about above, um, be prepared for negative feedback. your colleague or client might not be happy, you know, he or she might just feel like, okay, this person's not very helpful. I don't want to talk to the person. And so it's just important to remember that you can try your best, you can try to influence how the person reacts, but you can't control it. Uh, but what you can do is you can adjust your expectations on what you hope to accomplish. You can't please everyone. So, also another thing to remember is that things will pass. Everything in life is transient. So, if the person might be unhappy or frustrated initially, it doesn't mean that the person will be frustrated or unhappy forever. As long as you know that you were kind to that person, you stuck to your priorities, turn them down politely, and you did what you could within your own limits, then know that you already did your best. And just like any skill, right? To get better at saying no, you have to practice. You can practice saying it out loud, either by yourself, behind closed doors, or you can practice it with a friend or colleague. You just listen to how you say no. Your tone should be clear and your demeanor should be diplomatic. You want to say no in a way that makes other people respect you. And if you practice it enough, it'll eventually become easier. It's just like any skill. Like, for example, in the past, for me, presenting was like really scary. But the more I practice it, the more I feel more comfortable and more confident with it. So it's the same with saying no. And there's small ways that you can practice saying no. So small things like you don't have to do it in work. So maybe outside of work, if you want to eat at a different restaurant from your friends, you can voice that out instead of just being like, oh, okay, we can go to wherever you guys want. Suggest that you want to go to McDonald's. Yeah. And if someone asks you to volunteer, but you're already busy or you don't want to, just say, I'm sorry, I can't do it this time. Maybe in the future. Or if someone calls you and you're in the middle of something, don't pick up the call or just let them know it's not a good time to talk. And so some ways of how to say no. So we don't always have to say no, but we can say no in different ways. For example, like, I'm going to have to pass this time. I don't want to say yes and then let you down. This is just not right for me. Or no thanks, I have another commitment. Unfortunately, it's not a good time. Thank you for thinking of me, but I cannot. Yeah, so those are just some examples of how you can say no without really using the word no. Okay, so for focus, like, so a lot of times, right, if we say yes to too many things, it can affect our focus, our productivity might get compromised, and we tend to procrastinate. So it's important for us to have clarity about what's important to us and be able to say no to things that aren't. And in Uprise, if y'all ever check the app or the website, so this module will guide you on how to gain more clarity on your values and how to remain focused on what's important to you. So I saw some questions in the chat. Okay, so some of you are saying that when you say no, you might feel guilty afterwards. So then that's where actually, like, practicing being mindful about, like, practicing mindfulness will come in handy. Actually, that's also another module that is in our chat. So earlier on, when I talked about things being temporary, so to accept that you feel guilty and to ask yourself, What are you really feeling guilty about? And recognize that that's a feeling that will eventually pass. I know it's not an easy concept to grasp right now. Um, However, if you do like start practicing mindfulness, it can actually help you in the long run in recognizing that things are more transient. Ah, and thanks for sharing. So we also have a webinar about overcoming guilt. So I guess that would be a perfect segue into knowing like if you do say no and you feel guilty, then you can learn how to overcome the guilt after that. Okay. So some problems with leaving unenjoyable work to others. And yeah, so when it comes to work, so I'll give you an example. Like, there's this one workplace that I worked with, and sometimes I work with clients with intellectual disability as well. So it's very easy for people to give all the unenjoyable work to that one person. However, like in this workplace, they recognize that for unenjoyable work, everyone is also part of the team. So they then decided to split up that unenjoyable task for to all the different teammates. So I'm wondering whether for that task, if you are able to recognize that, okay, sometimes you have to do it, but it's also important for other people, other members in your team to contribute to it as well. And just to sum up everything, saying no doesn't come naturally. It's very important to say no to things um, that you don't want to do. And like you said, it's not easy because sometimes other people might not want to do it too. But also like learning that you are important and you need to make space for yourself and practice saying no and practice sitting with the emotions of feeling guilty.